Hello, and welcome to Ending Physician Overwhelm. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Mello. I'm a family and obesity medicine physician, as well as a certified life coach for physicians. In this podcast, we talk about how the learned habits of people-pleasing, perfectionism, and a lack of boundaries show up in our lives and how they contribute to burnout, exhaustion, and overwhelm. The healthcare system is broken, my friends, but let's not wait for it to be fixed in order to feel better. Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to another special episode of Ending Physician Overwhelm. Today, I am joined by a special guest, my new friend, Dr. Kristine Goins. Dr. Goins is an integrative adult and pediatric psychiatrist, and she is a big proponent of physicians having location freedom, which we're going to talk all about today. Dr. Goins, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, of course. So we often start off the conversation, talking about our experiences with burnout, our places where we have bumped up against the system, right? The system can be this very dehumanizing place, and there are so many different facets of it that it can look really different for each of us, even though there are definitely some common themes. So let's start out by having you share just a little bit about, who you are, and then we'll jump into your story.
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, I'm an integrative adult and pediatric psychiatrist. I'm also a digital nomad. I'm a physician coach, and I help physicians work from anywhere, as little or as much as they'd like. And so my journey into medicine really started when I was very young. I knew I wanted to be a doctor since I was 8 years old. So, the passion, the desire has been there for a long time. And so coming to that place that many of us have been where we're grappling with burnout was a surprise for me because this is my life dream.
Right. We worked so hard for so long, even if it wasn't since 8, right? But for many of us, it was. Yeah. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah. And so, I think my first experience of really like bumping up against the system, I like the way that you said that, was really in medical school. So it started pretty early, having periods of experience in demoralization, being on rounds where, I'm this eager med student, just like wanting to soak up everything.
I need to be here. And
and in those situations, having attendings tell me, when you're around, it's like you're invisible, or it's like you don't even exist to me. And when you're a med student, you're trying to grapple with this new identity that you're taking on. Becoming a physician is something you've always wanted to do. And so there's these components of really having to reevaluate who you are, and at the same time, really learn about who you are outside of other people's opinions.
Right.
And so that was an experience that I noticed not only I was grappling with, but other peers as well, who were being told like they could never be this kind of doctor, or I'm surprised you even got into medical school. So there was a lot of that. And so that was definitely a part of it. There was a part of feeling as though the humanity of not only us as students, but also the patients sometimes would come up, being in rooms, as a student, when I would hear residents say, oh, we're not going to round on that person. They're a Jehovah's Witness and they're not going to take blood. They're going to die anyway. Like it was like my heart would just be like, oh my gosh, what am I getting into? Because it's just different than I thought it was going to be. And of course, that doesn't symbolize everyone or even probably most doctors I've ever met, but it was just something that was really jarring in my experience. And so there are things that even decades later, I still think about like, wow, this was really part of my experience. And so there would be moments even then that I would, after rounds and things would be done, I would go into my car and just cry before I went home. I would cry for an hour in the parking lot, and then I would get myself together and go home and study for the next day.
Right. Because we're gonna show up, and it's such an odd thing, right? Because you're working so hard, you're so excited to be there, you're hearing this, this really awful stuff, right? Coming out of other people who are probably deep in burnout and dealing, with it in, that deep cynicism, but also being told it's like you're not there, that you're invisible. Ouch.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, and for many of us in medical school, right, like we don't have a lot of choice, really. I mean, yes, technically we could leave, right? But most of us don't really see that as a choice, right? We're going to continue kind of along the path. What followed, kind of those early experiences for you?
For me, I really relied on the community that I did create within medical school. And that really helped me because we had a lot of similar experiences in some ways. And so we were able to, encourage and support each other and say, like, this does not define who you are. We're still going to be doctors and we're going to be different. And we can use these experiences to propel us forward. And so that's kind of what we kind of rallied for. And so I, continued on. And there were experiences similar in residency and similar in fellowship, but there were also these moments during all of these different periods along the way where work was just a little bit less, like that last year of a residency or fellowship, and things are just a little bit lighter. You're kind of the senior, a little bit more than the other or the lower, years. And there's a confidence that comes with it. There's also some more time that comes with it. And so I noticed during those moments that I felt more engaged. I felt more excited about the work that I was doing. And I really came to the place in fellowship where I noticed that it was around 20 hours or less that I actually felt the best. There was a period during fellowship where I was really in the midst of that call, like the heavy call period. And thankfully, I had, during that period of burnout, this 1 month away that was part of my fellowship that allowed me to take time off and go to Nepal and study mindfulness for a month at a Tibetan Buddhist monastery. And that really changed my experience. I had always wanted to travel, but that was the experience that showed me that there was more to this than just traveling. There was this deeper work that could be done through those kind of experiences that I was having abroad. When I got to be an attending, of course, you always think that the next part of the experience is going to be
easy, wonderful. So, I just need to arrive, right? I just need to get there and then it'll be fine. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like the same tale. So I got there and I thought, okay, I'm going to finally do all the things. And I was doing all the things, I was working with the community that I always wanted to work with since I was a kid. I was working in all these diverse settings and nonprofits and schools and hospitals. I was teaching. I was the associate program director. I was chairing the EDI committee. I was doing all the things. And I noticed that the more things that I was doing, the more exhausted I was, the more disconnected I felt to even my own physical body. I would start to have chest pains in the middle of the day. And I knew I wasn't having a heart attack, but I was like, this has to be stress or anxiety. Something's going on. Yeah. I was trying not to be the person that goes to the ED in the middle of the day, but
yeah.
And
it's that tension, right, between I'm either the person who goes to the ER every day and gets ruled out, or I'm the one who really has the thing Right. And I
Exactly.
miss it.
Yes. Yes.
So much pressure. Yeah. Yeah. And so there's a couple elements in there, right? So you had this earlier experience where you noticed that, 20 hours of patient care seemed to be, kind of like a sweet spot for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and then there were all these like wonderful things that you wanted to do and like, engaging experiences, but it was kind of too much. And I'm wondering, in that spot, right, where you were kind of taking on too much, were you remembering kind of that 20 hours a week? Like what were you looking back at and seeing was okay or not okay? Or did you have any judgment about the 20 hours a week being, enough or too much?
I think at that point, I was just following the path.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't this, I didn't have my revelation yet
Mm-hmm.
that I could do this right out of training.
Mm-hmm.
I was only a year and then a second year, out of training. And that's not what people did.
Mm-hmm.
When I went to and I had an amazing boss, thankfully, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. And he was like, people don't take 6 weeks. I'm telling you to take 6 weeks off a year. And that's a lot for some. There's some physicians who don't even take 4 weeks off a year. And
Absolutely.
so, he really wanted me to do that. And even when I was doing that, other physicians, peers were like, hey, how are you taking more
Doing
than
that.
the
Yeah.
allotted
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
so it wasn't part of, I think, the culture
Mm-hmm.
to do that. And I think at that point, when you're a newbie attending, you're just trying to fit in, you're trying to go along, you're trying to prove yourself in these different ways. Like that's kind of the grooming that you've had along medical school, and the whole trajectory is that it takes hard work and it takes this, it takes that. You need to say yes, you need to be and there's some intersectionality to that with being a woman physician. There's some intersectionality with that with being a Black woman physician, that
Yeah.
all of those things kind of come together, and you have a lot of thoughts that you can change but thoughts that come up around who you feel you're striving to be. And so it did take me till later in that second year, once I was experiencing more of these physical ailments. I think at one point, every physical, like every organ system was
Mm-hmm.
beginning to kind of shut down in some kind of way. Like there was some dysfunction going on. And it was only as a psychiatrist when it got to depression,
Mm-hmm.
when I said, that's it.
That's enough. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't do it. When I started to have suicidal thoughts, and I was like, maybe it would be better to not be here,
Yeah.
Um, that's when I said, okay, like this is really serious. Like I can't just ignore I was ignoring the chest pains, but the depression's like, no, this is where we stop.
Oh, yeah.
So that was hard. And when I got to that point, I really started questioning everything. And I still kept going though. I
Yeah.
still kept going until during COVID, during the quarantine, both of my grandmothers died.
Mm.
And when that happened, that was kind of like my wake up call, where everything kind of culminated and came together, because it helped me to understand that although I had this grand plan, you talk about the 20 hours, it was like in the future, I'll get to it. I
Mm-hmm.
just got to get through this part.
Right.
But it helped me to recognize you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know when the future is going to happen. So if you want something, if you want your life to look a certain way, you have to do it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so important for people to hear. So I'm really glad that you kind of walked us through that journey because, I think there are many of us who, we put a lot into the care of our patients, and we know deep inside, right, that there's some limit to how much we can do, right? And whether that's
Yeah.
20 hours or whatever, it doesn't fit into the culture.
Mm-hmm.
It works against us, sort of being, yes, women. And, I'm not a Black woman, right? But I can only imagine, right? We've got extra sort of components there. And so we sort of know the truth for ourselves, and we're trying to hide it and pretend that it's not true, and tell
Mm-hmm.
ourselves, we should be able to do this like everyone else. We shouldn't take so much vacation. Um, and we know we're hurting ourselves. Yeah. And it takes often, something really extreme. So for some people, it would be chest pain, perhaps for the cardiologist, right? It would be
Yeah.
chest pain that finally stopped them, but maybe not the suicidal thoughts or not the migraines or, any number of things, because it's such a common story that
Yeah.
we work ourselves in this way until, some threshold, right, of dysfunction, whether that's in
Mhm.
our bodies or, having a catalytic event, right, of like losing someone that you care about and realizing, I don't want to live my life this way.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's part of what I would say is, the broken part. Like I talk a lot about the healthcare system being broken, but part of it is our culture that gets perpetuated by a lot of people who are burnt out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And afraid to ask for help, or afraid to set the limit of, I'm going to work 20 hours a week of patient care. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got to this place, this difficult place, right?
Mm-hmm.
You having suicidal thoughts, right? You losing people that you loved. What, like, where did that go next?
It woke me up to a place that I began to imagine back to like what that ideal life would be.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that I was more afraid of what it would be like to not live that life than all the people that I might disappoint or who might be upset or who might have something to say about me making this change. Because I think that was really what was holding me back. I had a million and one like self-limiting thoughts about what this transition would be like because it wasn't part of the ordinary path. And, we're very like into algorithms and like linear, paths. That's what we're taught. And I'm like, this is definitely on
Graduate,
the
we do
outskirts.
this, we do this, we get a job at a 401k, and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I had been a rebel in some ways, but this was my opportunity to actually act.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I had this 5-year plan where I was going to do all the things and then I was going to make my way abroad. And in this moment, I made a decision with myself. I said, we're going to do this. We're going to change our lives. So I didn't talk to anyone about it. I booked a one-way ticket to Colombia.
Mm-hmm.
My 5-year plan, I reorganized it to a 5-month plan and put a schedule on the books to leave.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And so tell us through it. So you had this passion to travel, and it wasn't simply like tourist travel,
Right.
right? But also just, I don't know, it sounds like broadening your experience, right? Of probably life itself, but also, I imagine, medical life, right? The trip to Nepal, right? And really getting to do some meditation and mindfulness. Wouldn't that be a lovely feature for all of our psychiatry colleagues and anyone who addresses mental health, right? To have that background and that training. So tell us sort of, as you get to Colombia, like, what is that life like in terms of sort of creating your own experience? People want
Yeah,
to do this.
for sure. For sure. I think first it was clarity of what I wanted that life to look like. So I had always thought it was very backwards
Mhm.
to work 5 or more days a week and have 2 days off. So the immediate change that I made was that I was only going to work 2 days and I was going to have 5 days off because that just made more sense.
Everybody's jaw just dropped.
Yeah.
They want to know
Um,
more.
So that's what I decided to do. I had always really thought about having multiple streams of income because I'm really passionate about a lot of different things.
Mm,
And it was really hard to deny that, even coming out of fellowship. And so I had a PLLC where I
mhm,
was doing some contract work and some consulting work on the side. And
mhm,
so I continued doing that work even when I left my full-time work in academia. And so I continued that work just a couple days a week. And it really allowed me to experience the time freedom that I
mhm,
needed. There's something that is really magical about having time.
mhm.
It just provided me this space to really gain clarity about what I wanted. I could do deep introspective work on my mind
Mhm.
that when you're working 60, 70 hours a week, it's like you don't even have time to think yourself out of the situation, really.
Or the bandwidth to be able to even
Mhm.
get started, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's just more difficult. It takes so much more, energy and intentionality to do that. And so having that space really allowed me to work on my relationship with myself and to develop a practice of consistently making decisions that were in alignment with my highest values.
Mm, mhm,
And so that's kind of what that initial time really looked like. I began pretty immediately to experience the therapeutic aspects of travel,
mhm.
which has been shown to decrease, symptoms of depression and anxiety, to decrease stress, to really allow for more emotional stability. And I was experiencing that along with the time freedom. That helps a lot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, both are important.
Yeah.
We just heard the psychiatrist say this, time freedom, right? The ability to have time and space to think and travel.
Yes.
Lovely.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And so tell us a little bit about, kind of what those components are like now, because you do practice and you have this coaching work that you're, um, bringing to the physician community. So talk to us a little bit about what that looks like.
Yeah. So after about 2 years into my journey, you know, I really saw myself like transform in so many different ways. And another thing about having time freedom is that it allows you to really tap into your imagination and your creativity. And during that time, I started to think, what could I give a value? Like what else could I be doing? What if more physicians knew about the opportunity to have this kind of freedom, to have this kind of life, whether it's the freedom of time, whether it's being able to be wherever they want to be. It doesn't have to be out of the country. Maybe it's they want to be, at their kids' preschool in the morning, or they want to be with their mom when she goes to doctor's appointments. It looks different for everybody, but I know that it's something that when I talk to physicians, it's something they really, really desire is to have that flexibility and to be able to design a lifestyle that is, complementary to their true values and what they want. And so that was really the birth of Nomad MD.
Mm,
I said I could really provide this service to other physicians and to help them think through, what they want most, what they need most in terms of really designing a life that they are excited to live, not that they
mhm.
are um, just grappling with and struggling through.
Yeah. Yeah. And talk to us a little bit about the practical details because you are still doing telehealth, right? That is US based. And you don't have to be in the US. And a lot of people are curious about that because many of us had never imagined. I mean, COVID, sort of birthed a lot of new ideas, right, for people. But I can imagine someone listening to you and they're thinking, well, that's great, but how can I work? I'm not a coach, I need to, I
Yeah.
need to see patients. What does that look like?
Yeah, I think it's about, so it's different for every physician because every physician has their own idea of like what is really important to them and what kind of work is most important to them.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's helping to think through what is your passion? There's this special sauce that every physician has, their medical expertise, their skills, their talents, their attributes, their life experience. And when they put all of that together, there is something that every physician can offer the world that nobody else can. And
Mm-hmm.
so, whether that is through consulting, whether it's through coaching, whether it's through telemedicine, whether it's through writing or speaking, there's a myriad of ways that they can do it, both clinical and non-clinical,
Mm-hmm.
um, that can lead them to a way of working where they are being paid highly for their, high skill set,
Mm-hmm.
but also that allows them more flexibility and freedom in terms of where they're located in space and their time,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is very different when when we're employed by either like hospital systems or other types of employment. There's ways to do it being employed also, like some people do locums and they have a sense of freedom that
Yeah.
most people don't have being in the hospital as well, but it can look like these different things. Like for me, it's, doing a lot of consultation and contracting with other medical institutions or pediatric offices
Mm-hmm.
that allows me to do that work virtually.
Mm-hmm.
But when people are working with different types of systems, particularly like if you're working a lot with insurance systems, they don't, you don't have that same flexibility because there's a lot of regulation around that, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. But I think it's such an important point that there's more opportunities out there than you will see on a job board, right? That you will, see when you're sort of searching for jobs, but it does take thinking flexibly, like, okay, well, there is the insurance system, and now there are these non-insurance systems that aren't only for the uber wealthy, right? They're just different models. Um, and you never know until you ask, right? I was just thinking as you were talking and saying like contracting with pediatric offices that want to offer psychiatric care to their patients. Um, they may not need or want you in the office 5 days a week, but wouldn't they benefit, right, from having that available to their patients? There's many sort of specialty areas that would be very similar, but it's not what we saw, right? It's not something that you'll, just find in a regular job search, but so important to think about.
absolutely. And sometimes it's not even that. Because I think as a physician, and I noticed this in myself, especially when I was starting on this journey, that I think of everything as me directly with the patient,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and there is also this way of making impact there with a patient, but also, when you're providing consultation to a group of other healthcare professionals, whether it's like pediatricians for me as a child psychiatrist, or a myriad of other, whether it's with other primary care providers, no matter what. But
mm-hmm.
there's a lot of providers that can benefit from what your special expertise is.
Yeah.
And helping them means helping a lot more patients than you would ever be able to help one-on-one. And so it's really also just thinking flexibly about how broad your impact can be in the earth if you just allow yourself, like you said, to think more flexibly and outside the box.
Yeah. So I want all of my listeners who do breastfeeding medicine to listen up here, right? Because just imagine, right, if a pediatric office had that embedded and pediatric psychiatry, just imagine how much better that would be, right, for patient care. But we have to create that, right? We have to really think like, who needs me? Where can I find them? Where are they? In a different way than we're used to, with the way that we've been trained, and okay, go get a job.
Exactly. It takes
Yeah.
it takes a different mindset, but it's the skill that we have. When we're thinking about a patient case and it requires some creativity and there's a patient who needs a medication that can afford it, we will turn over charts and go online and do deep, like we'll spend so much time and effort to make it happen, and we get really creative. I think we need to give that same passion to ourselves and think through these things for our own lives.
Yeah. And maybe think of ourselves as the recipient as being as important and worthy of that flexibility and that creativity as we do for our patients, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, talk to us a little bit about your coaching, right? Your desire to sort of bring this flexibility to other physicians. What does that look like?
Yeah, so it really looks like a physician being able to design whatever type of schedule and life that they want. For me, it looks like working 2 days a week. It looks like having 5 days a week to engage in traveling and exploring. And, I have so many other passions: movement, exercise. I study wine, I study languages. I'm in singing lessons. I do a lot of things.
Yeah.
But for everyone, that's going to look different. And so for some people, they want to work 3 days a week. They want to work 4 days a week. So I really push that as little or as much as you want, and the type of flexibility that you might want when you're thinking about what aspects of medicine you want to keep, what aspects you might want to shift or change. What does that look like? Do you want to be able to engage in medicine from a foreign, country? Like what would that look like? Maybe you want to spend 6 months of the year out of the country with your children so that they can have a different cultural experience. So for me, it's been a lot of one-on-one work, because I noticed that every physician really is holding on to a different dream of a life that they want. And so is really about providing them a strategic plan, helping them to develop that strategic plan that is in alignment with their values and their dream, and then also giving them the guidance, the accountability that they need to be able to implement it and carry it out. Because it does take some thinking through what is the financial burden in part, what does it look like in terms of thinking through student loans that might be, also a burden or something that they're thinking about, how it impacts their family and their children, how it impacts their relationships. What is traveling? How do we think through making travel as a great experience and as efficient and affordable as possible? Like all of these different components really come together. And as someone who travels full time, it's something that is my passion, is really near and dear to me.
It's such a wonderful guidance that you're able to provide, and really helping people to see not only is this possible, but it's also something, that we can sit and work through together, right? We don't have to recreate that on our own without the support, and, be shielding it from people who would tell us, no, you can't do that. Because there's a lot of that. We have a mutual business mentor, Dr. Una, right? And she really talks about, don't talk to fire extinguishers, right? Don't talk to people who are just going to squash your dreams. You sort of protect your dream, and you talk to people that you can really share that with, right? And get their support. But that is not for everyone to hear.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
Yeah. And, someone out there is listening, and their mind is blown right now, and they're in a place, right, where they're feeling maybe stuck or trapped, and like they could never have that life. What is it that you want them to know right now that you wish that you could have known, kind of when you were in your darker phases?
I wish I would have known that there's always a way out. There is a quote that someone had mentioned when I was really doing a deep dive in my next step. And a woman said, if you have a deep spiritual longing for travel, don't ignore it. It is an outward journey for an inward purpose.
Mm.
And it really touched me to hear that, because that was me.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And I knew that if I had this inspiration, you know, it was the universe giving it to me. And the universe was going to be able to provide everything that I needed to get to where I was going. So I just had to hold on to that. And so I would encourage, you know, the person listening to know that if you have a desire in your heart, it was placed there for a reason. You have everything that you need inside of you, and you can gather the supports that you need outside of you to make that happen.
Yeah. Like maybe your job is not to suppress that, right? Your job is to figure out, I wonder how this might be possible.
Yes.
And who can help me?
Yes.
I love that. And so important, because it just incorporates that element of, we are not, any of us, meant to do any of this alone, right? Like, we are meant to have the support and the communities around us helping us with all of life's challenges. But many of us just incorporated that idea that we have to do everything alone, because again, that's part of our culture, right?
Absolutely. But when we look back, a lot of times it was, you know, that one peer, that one mentor or family, you know, that also helped us to get to where we are. So we always relied on some sort of support, and that's also going to be the thing that gets us to our next leg of the journey.
Love that. So tell the listeners where they can find you and learn more about working with you to help create their dream life. Again, whether they're traveling internationally or not, but just kind of maybe blowing their mind a little bit about what's possible.
Absolutely. So they can find me online at thenomadmd.com. They can find me on Instagram at the Nomad MDs, and on Facebook at the Nomad MDs. And if they're interested, I also have a webinar coming out next month, November 14th, 7 p.m., talking about how doctors can fast track to financial freedom through traveling.
Okay. We'll have links to all of that in the show notes for anybody, who is driving right now or just can't look at it. But definitely check it out. Check out the webinar, guys, right? Because that's where you're going to get the details and, let your mind be blown a little bit by what's possible for you. I remember we were sitting down to dinner not too long ago, and as you were talking about your work, 2 female surgeons with young children were like, what? I could do what? I could travel? Oh, and I could just see like the wheels turning in their brains. And they were so excited by that possibility. So let your mind wander and check out the webinar, everyone. All right. Dr. Goins, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your story. I think this is really important for people to hear because, again, it's one of many things that we've never heard about and most of us have never considered. So I'm so glad that you're doing this work. And I'm so glad that you're really open to sharing it with us because it's so easy to keep ourselves in silence and in isolation. And we really need to benefit from each other. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, everyone. That's it for today's episode. Until next week, take care. Bye-bye.
Well, that's our show for today. Thank you as always for listening. To learn more about my coaching programs, head to www.healthierforgood.com. And if you love this podcast, please drop us a review on iTunes or support the show by clicking the link in the show notes. Until next time, take care.